I'll call this special work session of May into order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Waldridge,
Present.
Commissioner Thompson,
Present.
Commissioner May,
Present.
Commissioner Unger,
Present.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Present. And we do have a quorum tonight. And first item, citizen comments, and I do not believe we have any tonight.
We do not.
All right, I'll move on to discussion items. And first item is diversity officer. And Commissioner Waldridge, would you like to get us started on the right track on this?
Sure thing, Mayor. Thank you for adding this. This has been something that I've been trying to get on for a while now, since the last board that I was on. So I appreciate you bringing this now to the attention that it needs. So I appreciate being able to discuss this, and I wanted it to be a discussion so we could all get on the same path and then know the direction we need to move, so we can have staff and some of our board move this in the right direction for our city and other entities as well. And so my overall view for this, and speaking with some people within our residents, speaking with different people on different levels of bringing in a diversity position, would be, making sure that we're holding this position to a higher standard, and what you hold the title to is what you're going to get out of this. And so I'm hoping that we can eventually talk through a chief diversity officer or a director of diversity. Within this position, I would like it to be, being that we are, 250 to almost 300 employees within the city. So we are relatively small as far as our numbers. I think that it would be a great idea for us to start having conversations with Kentucky State University as well as the county, for us to look at this as a combined diversity outlook for our whole entire county and our city. What I'm looking is just for the city, for us, the entire BOC, to take full force of this and to move it forward and show that we support it, and hoping that we will, maybe support 50% of that salary and 50% of the benefits. And then the county and the KSU could split the other 50% of the salary, as well as 50% of the benefits as well. And just saying that's accountability for their part. They're showing accountability. We're wanting this to work out. We need this for our community, and being able to push forward. And what I see in this position is for this person to create and implement equity framework for our community, which will be a resource for not only the city and the staff of the city and the residents, but also a resource for the county, their staff and residents, and Kentucky State University staff and students. So I think if we come together and maybe start maybe an ad hoc committee to talk about what we're looking forward to, what we're looking forward for the city and the county, and what their expectations from this position is. I think we take all of that, put all of that together, and that's what we equal what we're expecting that person. I know we would have to work really close with Kathy as well as Miss Ross, as well, to make sure that all the HR and all of those things as far as benefits and things are crossed off as we're moving forward. But I think this position will help set commitments for all three entities. I think this position also will help with events and bringing in different culture events across the board. Again, when we speak diversity and equity and diversity and equality, we're not just speaking Black and white issues. Those are included. We're speaking all the culture. We want our diversity and our culture in Frankfort, Franklin County, and KSU to look like we do, and that is all of our cultures across the area. And so this would also provide workshops for us to get to know our community, meaning exploring other cultures and bringing attention to other cultures, as well as the officials from all three entities, departments from all three entities, as well as how to serve and how residents can be involved in pushing culture forward. I have an umbrella sort of started for our community that I started on the BOC last time that I would always work with Blair under, which is unity in our community. I'm hoping we can keep that moving forward and start doing things underneath of that umbrella for diversity. But that's sort of what I have. It's sort of an overview. This will also be women's rights. Everything will fall underneath this diversity. It will also be a secure person that can help with recruitment in all three entities in departments such as fire department and chief of police in the policing. But that's sort of overview, and would love to have everyone's thoughts, because this is going to be a diversity officer and we all need to have our say in that and what that looks like. So that's what I have to share, Mayor.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions or anything else to add? That'd be great. Let me know.
Commissioner Unger, you've got the floor.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing this up, getting it on the agenda. I love the idea. I'd like to, keep talking about it. Have you done some research on diversity officers in other cities that are similar to this? Or maybe any idea of, what a salary could look like, or just any info in sort of that range, what it could cost, and maybe I guess it sounds like they would sort of report to all three groups. I don't know, just if you could expand a little bit, that'd be great.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I've done a little bit of research, and as you know, right now it's a huge time for definitely implementation of diversity across the board in all entities in private and public sector. And so it is something really new that has not been in a lot of communities as per se a position. Then now it's come into fruition. It's happening now. So I can't really give you, there are a couple of little cities that I've looked at that are implementing that now and in the process. There's a couple in your larger cities that sort of have a diversity office. So I would think that as far as, I hate to say salary right now, because I think it's going to be different from serving one city versus serving a university, serving a city and a county. So I think that's just something we're going to have to look at, and to make sure that it is going to be competitive, so we can bring in someone who is educated, who has the talent, who has shown themselves in other areas and ready to move Frankfort forward. But, I did bring up, I think when I was working with Kathy, maybe a $60,000 range right now, depending on what we need from this person, what their qualifications are, what our expectations are from all three entities, and all three entities would definitely have a say in that to bring in someone. But that's sort of where I'm at right now. This is something newer. We've not had one here. And so I think it would just be great for us to have that. I know that we're really small not to have a diversity office, but one thing that I would like to implement, Commissioner Unger, is once we hire someone for this position, for them to have a diversity council with them. So if there's issues within the community, if there's issues within, maybe HR, anything of that nature, they can bring it to that diversity council sort of and work with that person with any issues that we may have in the city. So we may be able to work something out like that instead of having like a full staff per se, since we are so small. So thank you for those questions.
That's awesome. I like that idea. And I did notice, I think it was maybe this past week, the Kentucky Chamber posted a diversity position, which I thought that was really awesome to see. And sort of like where we're going with that. So I appreciate it.
Definitely. And I think that's something, as you bring up, I did see that posting as well and thought it was very interesting. And that's something we can also work maybe in seeing what they're looking for and what their goals and aspirations are for us all to connect. So anyone else have any questions or share ideas? This is about who we are. We're all diverse in our own ways. And so it's about diversity and culture for our entire community. And we represent our entire community and would love to get the community's voice on that as well.
Well, I'll jump in and say that I do think I like the idea. I think it's a great idea. And, I see it as, and I don't know if diversity officer is the right word, or if it's equity, or if it's inclusion. I don't know how the best way to phrase that, but I like the idea. Not only are we, and I think immediately people will think that, oh, we're talking about city employees and the city directory and how the city diversity within the city staff, but I think of this as something that is beyond city employees. It's the whole community, and this person not only will work with, of course, city employment, but all of the other cultures within our community, and promoting all the cultures. And there's different, different cultures have different festivals, have different events, and most of the time, if you're not part of that culture, you don't know anything about it. And I think the person in this position would help promote all of that, because I do think that the more we promote different cultures, because we have many that are here in Frankfort, and we want to, I think I want to, I'm not speaking for the whole commission, but I think I want to be the most inclusive city in the state. And I want to be, because I think inclusivity brings creativity, and that sparks everything else. So I want that to happen. So I think I'd be interested to know more about how we can do it. I don't know if it's the direction of staff to give us comparables, or if we're working with Commissioner Waldridge. Anybody else have any input? Yes, Mr. Russell.
Mayor, I think that per Commissioner Waldridge's comments, and I'm sure Ms. Maxwell has them, that we can probably take this along with staff and run with this and try to develop this and get it to you all as we go, whether it's not job description per se, but responsibilities that everybody's looking for that could create ideas into the future. And then we create a job description and go from there. But I think if you'll allow staff to do a little bit of research on this thing to see where it leads us, and then we'll come back with you all to get some more input, or keep you all posted along the way.
Okay, Commissioner Thompson.
City Manager Russell, I think that is a good plan to start. However, I do really like Commissioner Waldridge's idea that we have an ad hoc committee that perhaps uses citizen comments, as well as participation with Kentucky State University, folks who live in the county, perhaps the county school board, Frankfort Independent School Board, things of that nature, because those are the folks who are preparing our next job workforce. So I think it's important that we do that. I also think this is a great recruitment tool for our services with regard to fire and EMS and police. I just want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to discuss the necessity of this particular position and have some input on not only job qualifications, but also job responsibilities and things of that nature. And I think that would go a long way. So I agree with you, City Manager, that's a good plan. I just want to make sure that we circle back, and the mayor and Commissioner Waldridge maybe set up an ad hoc committee on that. So
I agree with you 100%, sir, about the ad hoc committee. I would just like to get a document started where we could get it to kind of the base foundation for this.
totally agree.
Let it grow where it grows, and let's see what happens with it.
Totally agree.
Mayor.
Commissioner Waldridge.
That is great. And I want to definitely, help in navigating this. But I also want to make sure that before we start, planning an outline, sort of piggybacking on Commissioner Thompson just a bit further, is, we want all of these entities to be a part. So we want to make sure they're a part at the beginning. We don't want to create something and feel like that we're creating something without them. And like, well, you're doing it by yourselves. Why do we need to, jump in right now? And so my goal is to make sure that we have this partnership at the very beginning. So I know I spoke with Miss Fields, Miss Kathy, as well as Miss Ross on this as well. And, I think that we need to sort of have a meeting with maybe a couple of entities from the county and a couple of entities from Kentucky State in making this first sort of outline of what we're expecting and what we want. And then we can bring in more of an ad hoc committee to go from there. But at least having all parties that would be expending some kind of expense on this position at the table from day one. So, we got to have an okay from them that they're willing to, be accountable for their part and be accountable for the diverse and inclusion of culture in Frankfort. So definitely will be a part of that, Mr. Russell, and moving forward and helping with that, with meetings and helping navigate that, because we as the city want to be intentional in every move that we do with this.
Well, without objection, do we want to direct the staff to work with Commissioner Waldridge to get that started?
I'm okay with that.
All right. It's a good
I
start.
would also, I know that we can't have 3, but I'd also like maybe some involvement from Commissioner Thompson as well, from the legal aspect of it as well. If he could sit in on a couple of our meetings, I think that would be great, just from the legal aspect that he has shared in a couple of meetings with us as well.
Love to. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
All right. Oh, good start. Any other discussion on the diversity officer? Well, we'll move on to item number 2 on discussion, family leave ordinance. Commissioner
Ms.
Unger.
Ross and Ms. Fields, Mayor, have been working on this thing, on this item. I'm sorry, it's not a thing, it's an item. And they will let one of them take the lead on this, if you don't mind, sir.
Go ahead.
I'd like to defer to Commissioner Unger. I know this is her her baby here, and maybe she'd like to get us started, and I'm available to answer any questions you have.
Sure, I appreciate that. And it is my baby. So yeah, thank you, Ms. Ross and Ms. Fields, for sort of helping me draft this ordinance, for creating this memo to share with the Board of Commissioners. I do believe that a paid parental and sick leave policy is really a pretty pivotal piece of legislation that I'm proud to present to you all and to the city, and to potentially, help city staff in that way. So, and to present it to this Board of Commissioners, and we're all parents, we've all been there. So I think it's, I'm just sort of ready to put families first, and one way for me to start by doing that is to advocate for our city employees. So, I want to take care of them when they really need it most. So I was gonna start by sort of outlining, what the policy could be. So it is a proposed policy that would provide 12 paid weeks of leave annually to all employees who are on leave for certain FMLA qualifying circumstances. So we're talking about birth, adoption, or foster of a child. And it would also include potentially care of a family member with a serious medical condition. And then I also wanted to add in 2 weeks of paid leave for kinship placement. So placement of a minor with a relative by court order. So, I think this is something, I knew I wanted to present because through COVID, the context around paid family leave has changed a whole lot. It's become critical that, more than ever, that all employees, including city employees, are able to balance family caregiving responsibilities without sacrificing income or savings. And other cities have looked to do this during this pandemic. So Louisville Metro just unanimously passed a 12-week paid family leave ordinance on March 25th. So it's happening around us, and I think that we should be one of the leaders in this. So, I think it's important for us to support working families. It'll help our economy continue to thrive during the pandemic and then beyond the pandemic. So, so let's see, the big question is, how can the city afford this benefit? So I think it's important to analyze the costs and benefits of it. So any costs associated with this benefit might be mitigated by costs and savings in the form of increased retention, decreased turnover, reducing hiring and training costs, and increasing in productivity because we're keeping employees. And also, I think providing this benefit also gives us a competitive edge in recruiting, as well as leading and, really just being the type of employer that we would want other businesses in our city to be as well. So, I know there's a lot of information here. Before I move on and see if people have questions, I really wanted to address the staff recommendations listed on page 3 of the policy memo. I'm gonna get a sip of water real fast. So let's see, it states number 1. So basically, I really appreciated all this being put together. So if the Board of Commissioners has concerns about costs on staffing, the following alternatives can be considered. So number 1 is making the paid leave applicable only upon exhaustion of all other leave. I personally can attest to this because while working for state government, I had to exhaust all of my leave in order to have leave donated to me. So that just, in an already very stressful time, you've just given birth, or, you're taking care of your newborn child, then you're worried about not having time when you're back at work. So say you get sick, say your child gets sick, or then you're debating, do I want to go without pay? Do I go into work potentially sick, or do I not care for a sick child? So I don't really see that as an option. I would like to move this forward as is, see how people feel about it. There's always option to, talk about the amount of time, but I just really think we need to, and I'll end here. I know I'm long-winded on this because I really care about it and think it's important, but I think we need to value working families, and the easiest way for us to do that is to do it internally. So as city government of a capital city, I just think we need to lead the way in this. And there's really no better time than now to try to pass this ordinance. So I would love to have the support of other commissioners and the mayor. As fathers and mothers, I think we can all, we've all been through it. We all know what a game changer this could be. So I will pass it on. Thanks for listening.
Commissioner Waters.
Well, as a mom, definitely a single mom, I appreciate this. And so I know when I saw it on Laura's board as coming up a few months ago, I spoke with her and was like, oh, okay, well, because our last board had mentioned something way before COVID had happened in something similar to this. And I spoke with Laura on it. And it's something that we just have to flesh out to make sure that we can do. I was aware that Louisville's passed, so I want to get theirs printed out and sort of compare that with what we have. But I do appreciate, I think, Laura assisting you along the way and getting this moving in the right direction, as well as Ms. Fields. And thank you so much for adding the family member. I know I brought that up to Laura as well, because you were more focused on children, which is, as parents, we understand that we do children first. But, I think it's just a great idea to add that on there, as we've had a couple of members, that are, part of our staff that have had their older, more seasoned parents have to move back into their home, get them situated because they have to care for an elderly. So I really appreciate, Laura, you transcribing that over to let them know to add that. I just think that that's great, in adding that. But I support it, definitely do. I just think there's a couple of things that maybe we could get fleshed out. And I do agree with staff on, just making sure that, this is set in place to where it will not be abused, that it will be helping with those parents and our employees completely. So, but I'm not opposed to it. I just think it needs to be fleshed out. And I think that it's a good time to look at what Louisville have. I didn't have time to print that out, but I'll get to that and sort of compare that. And if I have questions, I'll just send them to you.
Well, I'm happy to send it over because I reviewed it and I went back and forth with Laura. And yeah, I started initially with the family and the sick leave, and then took the sick out. But really, I just wanted to present the whole thing and then see where we sort of felt like we needed to go with it. So
no, I think it's a great start, Commissioner, definitely. But yeah, if you have that on email, it'd be great. Therefore, I don't have to search for it, just to compare. So I appreciate you bringing it forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson.
Commissioner Unger, as a dad, I appreciate this. I have 3 kids that, after they were born, it was there was a lot of time that needed to be spent at hospitals and doctor's appointments and lots of things like that. I'm also an adopted kid, so I really appreciate the idea of helping out folks who are in that process as well. One of the things that I want to make sure, though, is when I was reading the proposal, it essentially estimated that about 10 people would use, just as a guesstimate, 10 employees would use this annually. But it went on to say that staff believe that there would actually be more than 10 people that would use this. Do we know what the average number of folks that are claiming FMLA over the last couple of years, so we can figure out what those numbers are? And the second part of that question is there a industry standard, I guess is a good way of putting it, for local governments that utilize FMLA practices like this and provide benefits like this? And I'm just wondering how this actually works in accordance with those, and if there's any similarities, or if we're off base, or what we're thinking here. So I guess my question is, I want to know the financial impact, but also, are we kind of congruent with what other cities of similar size are doing, and go from there?
Well, I can start and help by answer part of that probably. So we average about 19 FMLA requests per year. So let's see. And I don't know if I want Kathy to speak to that at all, but I definitely did a lot of research on, ordinances that other cities had done. Memphis also passed a very similar ordinance in 2020 as well. And then I did speak to an organization who presented multiple aspects of what this ordinance would look like and where it looks like in different cities. So I did a decent amount of research here.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So we're actually looking more like to fully set aside enough money annually. We're really looking at more like a $300,000 impact financially if they were to use it fully, and that we had that many people that were on using the plan. Is that a safe?
It could be possible, and that's sort of where we need to, and that's what's hard about it, because we don't really know, but we got to look at the cost benefit of it as well. If we help out these families, then they're going to come back. They're going to want to keep working for us. And
yeah, I totally agree.
I don't know, Kathy, if you'd want to speak to that at all, or Laura, but I can pass the baton.
Hi, Kathy.
Hey, I was just going to add in that when we looked at those numbers, it was a little while back, and at that time it might have been when the program was being presented, more related around birth. So, Commissioner Thompson, I think that you're correct. Now that the program is being presented in a little bit more of a large fashion, that it might be more likely to be more upward toward the 19 number than the 10 number, because the 10 number focused more around, say, birth or adoption. Because we do have family medical leave requests that, of course, are for other reasons besides that. Yeah.
So my concern, Commissioner Unger, is, as everybody always knows, is financial. I want to make sure that we have the ability to present, these benefits, and that we can pay for them. I love the idea. I love the idea of being able to provide for these families and for our employees, and for them to be able to rely on the fact that they have this in their back pocket. I just want to make sure that we have the ability to pay for it. The mayor, I've told the mayor this a couple of times. I've told Kathy this a couple of times. I have a genuine fear of what our budget is going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now, because of some big factors like occupational tax and things like that. If we were 2 years ago and we knew what the estimated amounts that were coming in each year, we could see if we had the ability to to pay for this. I worry that with the new numbers that we're going to be stuck with for the next couple of years, that we may be presenting something that would cost us more than we have the ability to pay for initially. So I want to make sure that we have that built in, and perhaps the first ordinance that we do limits it to birth and adoption and things like that. And then we add in, as we become more financially secure, other FMLA necessities for time and things like that. I'm just thinking out loud and trying to offer up suggestions. I just worry about the finances of it, and I don't want to do something that is going to put the city in any worse position financially 3 years down the road because of numbers that we can't predict at this point. So that's just my concern. And I think this is a great program. I commend you for doing all the research on this, and I know you'll continue to do research on it. I just that's my concern. I want to make sure that we're able to do this and do it right. So that's where I'm at right now. Thanks.
Any other discussion? I do have a question. Mrs. Fields, are you still on? Have we denied any FMLA requests? Have there any been that have been so outlandish that we've denied any over the past couple of years?
Wow, nothing that is jumping to mind. So it must not have been that outlandish if it occurred, because it doesn't jump to mind. So
No,
I'm going to give an answer, no.
Outlandish may have been the wrong, but just, is there any been that's been questionable? So it doesn't, so up to now, there hasn't been anyone that has pushed the envelope, so to speak, on FMLA. But I guess there's the potential, though, if we make this available, that there'd be more requests. Is that right?
Well, family medical leave is going to provide all our full-time employees with 1 or more years of service up to 12 weeks, but it doesn't provide them pay. So Commissioner Unger's proposal ensures that they have the pay also.
Right.
But any employee would certainly be, for these reasons, be granted family medical leave. And we do have a donation program also, so that we are providing employees with paid leave, even if they have run out of leave on their own.
Got it. And that was, I guess my point was, is there the chance that since we're paying now, could there be an increase in request when otherwise there may not be, because they just couldn't afford to take the time. And so right now, can you answer if, because of the donation program, have you found anyone wanting or running out of time on that?
We have had a couple of situations, not for the reasons that this proposal gives. They were actually, they weren't related to caretaking. But we have had some situations which went months beyond the 12 weeks where the city did have to make a hard decision. They had met their federal obligations in terms of family medical leave. So that has occurred, but not for caretaking.
Okay, and then finally, so we're already paying all the employees their salary, what have you. And if they get time off, we don't pay them during that time. So I guess we do have we have some savings in our budget that year for that employee. So we're already budgeting for the salary, and we're basically, I guess we're already expecting to pay these salaries to the employees. Is that right? And now we're just giving them the opportunity for a qualifying event. It's got to be a FMLA qualifying event that they'll continue to get paid. That's the way I'm understanding. Is that right? That was a question. All right, Commissioner Thompson.
I think you're correct, and I understand where you're going with the questioning of Kathy. But I'll use an example of a firefighter. If he takes off 12 weeks, we're not only, and we put this ordinance in place, we're not only paying the 12 weeks of his salary, but we got to pay somebody to cover the shifts that he would normally work. So it's not a zero sum gain, if you will. It's not like we're paying it anyway. There's no difference in the cost. There really is, because we have to pay someone to cover those spots. And I would venture to say that even if we're going so far as to say, city hall staff, that would be similar in the sense that, we may have people who are having to, pick up the slack if somebody is out for that long. So I totally understand the line of questioning. I just, on certain employees and especially service employees, we're gonna have to pay for their replacement as well. So that's just something to take into consideration.
Good point. Commissioner May.
Commissioner Unger, did you want to respond to Commissioner Thompson? Okay. Just for my clarification, so are we discussing adding additional time or just paying for the time? So under this proposal, would somebody get the 12 weeks that they already get plus an additional 12 weeks that are now paid? So somebody could, in theory, take 24 weeks, or?
No, it would run with the FMLA. So they would just be getting paid for the 12 weeks.
Okay. So at most, someone is absent from the position for 12 weeks.
Right. And
We're not talking about extending the time. It's just paying them for that FMLA time at this point.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for myself.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Well, would it be possible to see if one of the recommendations was to look at this if they've used up their other sick time or pay, I don't know if there's a way to run an analysis on that to see how much that would cost so that the city would be a backstop. So that that way people would be ensured that they would have 12 weeks. I don't know if that's a way to look at this as we continue to look at it. Mr. Russ, yes.
Ms. Fields, can we go back in and look at those numbers to see? I know we probably haven't had very many cases that would get past that, but I think one point, Commissioner Unger, that you made was that when people are getting short on time and they know that and they're facing an extended period of absence, that it does create stress and strain. And that's why I think that recommendation was on there for number one. So they would not have that much stress on them that this could pick up after they had exhausted all their time per se that they had built up for the city. So they would at least know that they had some recourse. But I would think that we could go back and look into our long-lived absences or situations that occurred as such and maybe come up with some information on that, Mayor. I can't speak for Ms. Fields, but I'm best guessing that she does a lot of things that we can see.
Commissioner Unger, any other on that? Do you feel okay with that?
Yeah, I guess so. We could also talk about reducing of the amount of paid weeks if people are more comfortable with starting at a certain number, maybe 8 weeks. I think it's a good jumping off point. It definitely wouldn't have been enough for me to be at home with a newborn baby because, most time you can have, the better. And it just means for, the health of the family and the baby, the, 3 months to 12 weeks is really a key time when you've got a newborn. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about different time frames, have people look at it. But I would love to just, if people are in support, move forward with it in whatever way we can.
And I think after I asked those questions earlier, I think it is better if we are going to offer any paid time, it's got to be on the front end and not on the back end, because then people won't have an incentive to hold on to sick days, and if they know we're going to pick up the difference. So I guess it all comes down to cost and how much are we willing to invest in this program, right?
And invest in our staff. Yep.
Yes, invest in our stuff. All right, any other discussion on this? I think it's a great idea, and I think it's worthy of continued exploration. If not, we'll direct staff and Ms. Fields and Ms. Ross to continue looking at this for us, and we can revisit it.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right, and now we will move on to item number 3, a recycling update. And do we have Mrs. Beard on the line? Or I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Russell, if you want to start.
This is good timing, Mayor, as I think Public Works is getting ready to relet the contracts on recycling, and Ms. Beard has quite a bit of information on this that she can share with us.
Okay.
Sure. Yes. And I know that this is a really important topic in our community. I looked back about a year ago, we ran the numbers, and even with recycling being down nationwide, this community recycles at a much higher rate than the state and the national average. So I know that it's an important issue for our community. And I want to just say that it is an important issue to Public Works and to our solid waste department. I just want to start out with a quick update on where we are and what we recycle, just as a reminder to the community. Currently, we accept metal, aluminum, plastic bottles and jugs with the screw cap, paperboard, and that would be non-refrigerated food. Basically the containers that do not have the waxy coating, like cereal boxes, tissue boxes. We also accept dry cardboard and even non-greasy pizza boxes, if there is such a thing. So, but we currently take our materials to the Lexington facility. We have 2 separate contracts. We have a disposal contract and a hauling contract. Our hauling contract is still in place, and it allows us to go to West Rock or Lexington. And our disposal contract is currently out to bid. We'll be opening bids on May the 27th. One of the changes that the bid documents specify is that we want them to accept our glass commingled curbside. We are still accepting paper, and paper includes magazines, mailers, newspaper, paperback books. We're accepting all of that at drop-off locations at Rouse Avenue, as well as the county has a drop-off at behind the sheriff's office. So paper is not accepted in your curbside cart, but it is accepted at drop-off locations. So that is something that may or may not change with this new bid. We'll see who gets the contract. We'll review the terms of their proposals and just decide which one makes the most sense environmentally and economically. So we want to consider both of those factors. But that's where we are. Like I say, between now and May 27th, we'll be receiving bids. And after that, I think we will return to the board with our recommendation, and there can be further discussion, of course, anytime between now and then. So I'll take any questions you might have.
Commissioner Thompson.
So in a conversation that I had last week with some folks, we discussed the fact that the city does not offer trash and recycling for the downtown business community. Is there an ordinance in place, or is there something that is preventing that from happening that we might be able to review in the near future or with this process?
I hope I don't misspeak. I believe there is an ordinance in place. Honestly, Byron, our superintendent, can answer all these questions easily off the top of his head. But we do accept recycling from some commercial businesses, but the trash is all independent. We can look at that. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare all of that information.
It's all right. It's all right. With regard to the recycling, when was the last time that contract was negotiated?
That's a good question. It was definitely before I was here. I think that they have done 5-year terms. So I'm guessing it was probably about 5 years ago.
Okay. Do we have any idea if the rates that we are paying is commensurate with the amount that we are providing to the recycling company? And is it standard with what other communities are paying at this point?
Yeah, a lot of the surrounding company or counties dispose of their materials at the same place as us. And we have a locked-in rate right now. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's about $26 at this point, but that would be commensurate with similar communities of our size. Another thing about Lexington, and what makes it kind of hard to run all of these numbers, is that the costs do fluctuate and our returns fluctuate based on their market for recycled materials. So as they sell materials or consign materials, we get money back. So that varies throughout the year. For example, in January, we had a bill of about $2,600. And in February, we had a credit of about $800. So it varies throughout the year as far as that goes. But our initial cost is set at around $26, $28 a ton.
Okay. With regard to our rate that we pay, if we significantly increase the rate that we provided, does that lower the potential cost per tonnage? Is that how it works with regard to this type of agreement?
No, it is set per tonnage. That cost goes up as we deliver more materials, but then again, that opens the door for more consignment of materials for us to get more credit back.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I have right now. I may have one when it comes back to me. So thank you. I appreciate you answering all those questions, Katie.
No problem.
Any other? Commissioner Unger?
So I know that, recycling, like you said, Ms. Beard, is a pretty big topic for discussion. We talked about it, and I feel like a lot during the campaign. Miss Anna Marie Rosen, who could have totally been in my seat right here, except for I won by 8 votes. That was something she sort of organized during the campaign, was going to visit the West Rock facility. So I don't know, is there, would it be helpful to have some sort of maybe city citizen task force that could, a lot of people really care about recycling and trying to make sure we can recycle as much as possible, and looking at the different, companies and contracts. Do you think that would be helpful?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I meant to mention it. There's a solid waste task force organized by the county, and Byron Roberts, our solid waste superintendent, is a member of that task force, along with several community members. Of course, the county, I believe there's a magistrate on that board as well, and they meet every other month. I think they have kind of slacked off during 2020, but they started meeting again in April. And so I think they're going to, step up and be an active task force. I don't know if, I feel like that would serve our community and we could maybe get more involved in that.
Okay. Do you know if there is a possibility to add people to that group or?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would think so.
Okay.
We can find out. Brittany Woodward kind of leads that group. She's the county coordinator, and we can find out from her.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson?
Commissioner Unger, thank you for asking that question. I would greatly appreciate the ability to send this issue to that task force, and if the mayor and the other commissioners want to add people to it. I think there are a lot of issues here that may want to be discussed by people who have much more in-depth knowledge of this than I do. But I also think we need to consider how this affects how the county does things with this particular issue. I think there's room to work with the county on this issue. I'd love for this task force to at least begin those discussions, and perhaps that would be cost effective for us. So I would greatly appreciate the idea if we can get this task force moving and task the task force with actually handling some of these questions up front so that we can get some answers to us before we make any decisions. So that would be my suggestion. If it needs a motion, if we can even do a motion on that. I don't know, Solicitor Ross, how you want us to handle that, if we want to do that or not.
You guys are certainly free to make a motion to that effect, Commissioner.
That being said, I would move to ask staff to work with the already established committee that has been put in place, and making sure the mayor has filled all those spots on that, and address these questions and issues that we may have, and also ask that they work with representatives from the county to discuss any options for us to work together on these issues and report back to us. Sorry.
Second that? I don't, is that a motion?
Yeah, that was a motion.
Commissioner Thompson, was that a second, Commissioner Unger? Okay, now discussion on this. I have a question. So the motion is to create a new committee within the city, the Board of Commission, right? That we will oversee to explore ways to work with the existing task force. Is that right?
Well, if there's an existing task force, I don't want to create a new one. I would think that would be silly. I want to make sure that the task force is filled with all the appropriate people, and then I want them to actively do something with it. So if that group is not working, then we need to get some folks to actually do that. But I don't want to create a task force to create a committee to create I don't want to do all that. I just want the standing committee to begin work on these issues and report back to us.
Yes, first we need to see where they are, if they are anywhere on these recycling issues, and because I think that's our main concern right now is the recycling, not necessarily, which is waste management.
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? Would this be better as yes, Commissioner Waters, were you
I
going?
was just going to say, if there are spots on the task force that are open, I would, recommend that Miss Rosen or maybe Diane Strong be added to two women that I'm aware of that are huge on recycle. They have done work within their campaign when they were campaigning for city commission. And I just think that allowing people who have a passion for it to sit on such initiatives and such committees, I think will behoove us continuing to move the right direction and hold that committee accountable. So if I could suggest those two names, I think it'd be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
Thanks.
Commissioner Unger?
I'd second that as well. Anna Marie Rosen for sure. I know a few other people, but also if it's a county task force, do we think we'll be able to add people or, and I would say if we can't, then maybe we do need to create our own and we can address that later.
Well, is this something, Ms. Ross, is this something that we can just direct, let's say Commissioner Unger or someone to oversee, or rather than create a whole new task force?
Yes, you absolutely have that option to do that. And if I'm wrong, Commissioner Thompson, I thought your motion was more to direct staff to examine and investigate the existing task force and report back on
Yes.
on what we find out. And then that way we'll know what the situation is and what might be the best options moving forward for the city.
Yes, and that may require some phone calls to the county to figure
Yes.
out who is on the task force and where we go from there. But that was my motion, was to find out the status of this task force so that we can then task them with some specific items that we want to go down the list and handle.
We have a commissioner be in charge of that. That'd be my discussion item here. Commissioner Unger, would you like to be tasked with that?
Sure, be happy to.
And since we have Mrs. Beard, so, okay, we have a motion, we have a second, we have discussion. Any other discussion on this? Okay. Ask clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Waldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner May,
Yes.
Commissioner Unger,
Yes.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Yes. That motion carries. So thank you, Ms. Beard. And I'm interested to see how that's a good start on that. Next item is the homelessness task force. And I will ask Commissioner May if he would like to.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Well, obviously, we're kind of picking back up on discussion items we had before about learning about the CARES Coalition here in Frankfort in our community. And since we've all taken office, I know we've all had individuals in our community and business owners reach out with the idea of wanting to do more, making sure that we're doing better as a community for those in our community that are needing extra assistance. I'm not sure with homelessness per se task force, if you know the verbiage is correct, it's the issues of outside of that. But I spent the day getting a lot of information from Miss Blair Hecker and Mr. Tommy Russell, kind of getting updates on a little more information about CARE so I could understand it. And I was hoping that we could have Miss Hecker speak a little bit as well to kind of update all of us a little bit more on what CARES is currently doing to address some of these issues and maybe what the potential opportunities are. And then perhaps Mr. Russell or Ms. Hecker would want to speak to previous task force that have existed in the community and some of the wins and again, just kind of what our areas of opportunity are. So more of an update is kind of what I was hoping to discuss.
So if for I think 20 years ago, we had a homeless task force under the former mayor. I think there were 16 people on there, maybe, Mayor. I know I sent you the document out. I don't have it in front of me right now. And then again, it identified a lot of the problems and issues that we face today. You know, a task force is, comes up with a lot of ideas. It identifies a lot of problems, but then when you get down to the resolution of some of those problems or the help needed for some of those problems, it's much more difficult. It requires a smaller group, an actionable group. And I think given the time that if we would have some time to put in on this, I think that we are on the right track to readily identify some of these issues, you know, that Ms. Hecker is spearheading with the CARES Coalition. I see she's joined us now, so I'm going to let her expound on that just a little bit. And just with the understanding that this is a community-wide issue. It's not just downtown. It's not just East Frankfort. It's not just the old Sears building. We get calls daily to pick up needles and all of those things, you know, from police officers to EM staff. So this is a community-wide event that's happening or that is widespread here. And there are a lot of issues that drive that. I've had this conversation with y'all before that homelessness is not a crime. A lot of the issues that come along with homelessness tend to manifest into other things, and they tend to grow out of control. Then the public sees them and they think that it's a huge issue. But like I said, I'm going to let Ms. Blair expand on this and see what the next question is, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So just to kind of pick back up, we talked about the CARES Coalition. I believe it was at the April work session. And we were just kind of kicking that group back off. And again, to kind of piggyback on what Mr. Russell just said is that, you know, the coalition is a direct result of that previous task force. So, you know, taking the recommendations, actually have that plan that originated from that task force right here that I've been using to kind of inform some of the directions we're going with this group. But it is now, right now at its core, just the agencies who are providing these services, homelessness assistance, transitional housing, family resource centers, food banks, food pantries, Homeless Housing Coalition, all of those agency players. And so it is whittled down to a small group right now. We had our first meeting in April. And so what the structure is for now for this group is to meet quarterly. And those are working meetings. They're 2 hours each. And so these agencies, we conducted a lot of things. We did a strength and weakness analysis of where our current services are right now. Then we're doing some email work. So I'm still meeting monthly with the directors of the shelters. They're serving as the steering committee for this. We're meeting again tomorrow to kind of discuss the feedback that we've gotten from that analysis from that first group, and then to decide where we go from there. So some of the things that are showing up, I think, just to address concerns is that, you know, I think the issue is it's an immediate problem that we see. It's a problem that I think can grow quickly, but unfortunately the solution is not so quickly achieved. And so we are identifying some of the major gaps that are contributing to our homeless population right now. I think some of those have already been in the works since last July with the initiation, or the first part of this project was to secure a new emergency housing shelter that the Simon House is taking over and running. That is hopefully going to be opened later this summer. That is going to alleviate some of these immediate concerns. The women's shelter is also working on a new building. And then once COVID restrictions are further lifted and our shelters can go back to full capacity, I think you're going to see some immediate relief, so to speak. But those larger issues are still going to be there. So the gaps that we're looking at addressing to help with these problems is specifically focused on substance abuse issues and equipping our agencies to be able to handle that. That's a big gap right now. Permanent transitional housing, that's a big gap right now. A central intake point, which is what we're hoping is going to come from this coalition and the start of the emergency shelter at the Simon House. And interagency communication. So providing a framework for all of our agencies to better be communicating. Those are the gaps that were immediately came to the forefront so far, just from our work that we're going to be figuring out our plan of attack for. And those were also echoed in the work of that task force that we've already seen. So from so many years ago. So I think what we are seeing is that, you know, some of these things haven't changed. Now let's get boots on the ground and figure out how we mobilize resources to actually address those gaps. I don't know if that helps or if you all want more information.
Mr. Russell.
And Mayor, I think it's important for the community to know that we are working the issues. We have identified the problem. You know, we know what they are. We're working the problems now. It's like Ms. Hecker said, this is not a quick fix. Everybody would love to be able to come up, you know, with the Sears building and open it up and it'd be a one-stop shop for everything like that. But I've had those conversations and some of those things are just not reality. I understand it's painful to the public to see these things. But rest assured that we are broaching the subjects, having the conversations, and we have been very much proactive, I think, to try to get on top of some of these issues.
Commissioner Thompson.
Ms. Hecker, I want to make sure I was typing in all the different folks that you had on the group. It is incredibly important that at some point we have some information or a dialogue with the local district court judges because they see these folks on a regular basis, and we don't have a mental health court here in Franklin County, and we don't have a misdemeanor drug court in Franklin County. So many of these folks are suffering from one or both of those issues. So they instead become regular folks on the dockets that we have. And so Judge Manjit and Judge Olds do a great job of trying to manage the needs of these people without a lot of resources. So in the discussions of creating a solution to the homeless need that we have here in Franklin County, I think it's important that we bring them in and perhaps Rick Sparks with the county attorney's office and discuss what are the needs that they see from some of the folks that are regular people on the dockets, defendants, and what we can do to incorporate those needs as well. And we could keep going on down the list to the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, to the local hospitals, all those folks. But I do know that Judge Manjit and Judge Olds have a definite desire to help on this issue. And I think it's something we need to do to at least touch base with them and see what their ideas are with how to solve this problem.
Sure. And so if I can just speak to that, that is the goal. So the goal is right now we're focusing on these agencies and we're getting a picture of where they are, what the gaps are that they have within their organizations. And then we're kind of starting at 1,000 feet and then we're going to keep zooming in. And eventually we're going to get to the point. My goal is, we do these 4 quarterly meetings this year, and then maybe that whole system goes away and we're in more actual project management teams. And that's where we're pulling in these stakeholders because those, they're going to focus on a very specific issue and maybe not be interested in some of the community messaging that we're doing and, agency fundraising and things like that are all part of the conversation right now. And so that's my goal, because I want this to be effective, but I also want it to be a good use of a group. And, you know, we've all seen what can happen when you get too large of a group working in a lot of different directions all at once. And so I'm trying to also make that a focus so that it's a little bit more productive in the long run.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Hecker, have we had full participation from all the groups in the CARES Coalition thus far?
Yeah, we're working on it. I would say we had about 15 people actually attend the first meeting. And since then, I've added another 4 to 5. And so actually now I feel like we have representation from all of the key players who are going to form this first part. What we're going to do next is start filling out exactly what Commissioner Thompson talked about, is who are the other stakeholders that need to be involved in these roles. But I think as far as immediate agencies go, I think that we have a really good core group.
And I guess, is there some type of deadline or a goal for when we might have action items on, I mean, as a board, you know, permanent, with regards to permanent transitional housing or substance abuse? Is there anything along the way? And we're talking about meeting quarterly, and you know, in my mind, sometimes I feel like this is an hour by hour or day to day problem, and I just feel like that it's acute right now. And is there anything that we can do right now?
So I will say that individually, all of the shelters do have plans in the works to meet, you know, emergency housing and transitional housing needs within the resources that they're allowed. You know, I do think that once we see the Simon House, again, the Simon House Emergency Shelter opening up and the additional building for the women's shelter, I do think that we're going to see some more immediate access. I would say my goal right now is we have all the input from these agencies. My goal is to have the next step of narrowing down, and at our July meeting, that will largely center on turning those gaps into measurable goals. So by the end of that July quarterly meeting, I would say that we will have those goals designated, and then go from there in terms of having stakeholders and projects and things like that.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Russell.
I will say that Ms. Hecker made a good point, because our shelters are running at reduced capacity, Mayor, because of COVID. Surely by August, July or August, something like that, as restrictions start to relax. For the number of people that perhaps are seen on the streets, those numbers should reduce some. And then we'll kind of have some input from there to see where this is going. But one of the things that the city has done for sure is, and Commissioner Waldridge was in that group, is they donated $100,000 to the women's shelter, or to the Simon House, to create that shelter for women, because that was the most difficult situation that I ran into all the time. I had a men's shelter, but I did not have capacity for women, single women and or families when they came in. And that's kind of where that idea came from. So we have done very well, but as capacities increase in these shelters, I think the problem will still be there, but it may not be as visible it is now for those that choose to stay outside and not be able to get in those shelters.
Thank you. Commissioner May.
Thank you. Ms. Hecker, is there currently with CARES Coalition, is there a preferred method for community engagement and communication? If not, are there any recommendations that you would have or suggest on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, as a result of our conversation today, I think that what we could do and what we should do, so we did basically a survey in our last coalition meeting with the agencies for them to identify very specific strengths, very specific weaknesses, very specific gaps within what they see in their work in their agencies. So I think what might be a good logical next step, especially because this is such a community facing issue, is we can translate that same survey onto our Frankly Speaking platform and tailor it a little bit so it's more for public participation and get feedback that way. I think that would maybe provide us another aspect, another way of looking at what we're getting, and would just give us more information to go off of in setting these goals. So, you know, if that's something that you all think would be beneficial, I think we could definitely do that and get that up and out for public response this week.
Sounds good. Commissioner Thompson.
Do we need to make a specific motion to task staff to do this, or just let them go with what they already are doing, and they'll get back to us when we have something to do?
Ms. Ross?
If you are satisfied with what you've heard, then there's no need really to make a motion. You can just direct staff to continue on the route that they are proceeding with and report back to you all as needed.
Okay, thank you.
I think as a commission, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I feel like that we're receptive to any ideas. And we're eager to see, and I know this is a nationwide problem. It's not just a Frankfort problem, and it's everywhere. So I understand that. Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Hecker, and thank you for all you're doing on this. Okay. And next, so that ends the discussion items. Next up, action items. Number 5 on the agenda, 2021 Recreational Trail Program Grant Application. And Mr. Russell, you want to talk about this, or we have Rebecca?
Rebecca's on.
All right, thank you. Hi, Ms. Hall.
Hi. This is just a resolution for the 2021 Recreational Trail Grant. A group of staff, including Sean Pickens from Parks, Katie Beard from Public Works, myself, and Eric Cockley from Planning, met with Walk Bike Frankfort and got some input from them on, you know, what projects they had that they wanted to push forward, and we lined that up with what Public Works and Planning and Parks wanted to do. And the one that we came up with is a 8-foot shared path along Shinkle Lane that would help connect several neighborhoods as with each other, as well as at Cove Springs. So we just need a resolution passed to move forward with this application. There is a match involved that can be, it's 20% of the overall project, which would be a max of $250,000 for the overall project and $50,000 match, and that can either be in kind or cash, or a combination of both. So, and that we wouldn't be getting this funding until next fiscal year. So I will entertain any questions you all might have.
Any questions? So I do have a question. Is this going to connect to Cove Spring? Where would that connect to Cove Spring from Shinkle, around where the old Tex is? Do you know how that would connect?
I do not, but is Sean or Katie on? One of them probably could answer that question.
Yeah, it will connect very close to. The best way to explain it is Charlie Boo's property where the state nature preserves used to be, that parking lot. One of the trails from Coves comes up the hill and comes right out onto Shinkle Lane right there. So that's where it would be.
Sounds good to me.
Move to approve.
Okay, motion,
Second.
second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Thank you, Mr. Pickens. All right. And next item up, golf cart repairs at Juniper Hill Golf Course. And we'll bring that. Mr. Pickens still on? We'll turn it over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. As some of you probably know or may not know, all of our golf carts at Juniper Hill are battery powered. They don't run off gas, which can be a challenge sometimes keeping them charged because they do get heavily used. The batteries are beyond their useful life. I believe they're close to 5 years old, give or take. And they're only meant to last about 3 to 4 years. So we've gotten a year, maybe almost 2 out of them, what they're useful for. So we're needing to replace those. We had a discussion of either replacing all of the golf carts from just buying all new golf carts, but that's a considerable hefty price tag at the moment. We will need to do that in the future, but not in the foreseeable future. That's probably a couple years down the road. But these batteries are needed. We've had several. We're probably only able to use about half of our fleet. We have a fleet of about 65 golf carts. We're probably only able to use about half of them, give or take. Some work better some days than others. So we need to get these batteries replaced to make the fleet more operational, provide better customer service. As we've been coming out of COVID, we've kind of seen a spike in demand on anything parks and recreation. That includes golf. So this also includes some relatively minor repairs to the golf carts, repairs to windshields, repairs to seats, so repair to brakes, I believe, a little bit here and there. So I will entertain any questions you might have.
Commissioner Unger?
So I was just wondering, I don't know all of the procurement processes, but was this a loan bid or were multiple bids looked at? Just sort of wondering for my.
Yes, we put out an invitation to bid, which Ms. Ross reviews all of those before any of those go out. And when only one company, the company that you all have, Deaver, responded to the bid appropriately. They got it in on time and sent in the information. There was one other company that also bid on it, but they didn't make it by the deadline. And they also didn't provide all the information that we had requested in the bid. So that's why there's only one bid. But we feel, myself and Kirk Schooley, the golf pro, we feel very confident that the bid is very much within range. And the bid that was sent in that didn't meet all the requirements, they did have a total cost, and it is more than this bid by several $1,000s. So we feel confident it's a good bid.
Okay. And I'm not a golfer. I've been on the golf course only to run a couple times, and honestly, the golfers weren't happy about it. So I haven't done that recently. And not during playtime. This was early morning. But just wondering, so on like a really busy day, or if there's a tournament, how many golf carts? I mean, would you run all 65 at once?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah. On an average day, we're probably running 30 or 40 golf carts. If we're busy and have tournaments, we're running every one we have.
Well, I did receive an email from somebody that golfs up there a lot, and also I think helps volunteer and do some work. So I did get information about a month or so ago that some of the batteries were not working, and so I know it is needed. But thank you for the additional information.
The bid also includes some new chargers. That's a key thing to this, making sure they're charged correctly. And so a lot of the chargers have gone bad too. So we're needing to replace some of the chargers as well. And that's all included in the bid.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson, sorry.
Sean, is there any reason that we only got one bid on this? I mean, is there something that I just don't know about, or is there a reason why only one would meet the qualifications of, actually fulfilling out the bid and things like that? It just seems odd to me that this is probably something that is done quite a bit for, on a regular basis. So I'm just wondering why we end up with one bid on this
Yeah,
project.
From the best that I know, there's 3 prominent golf cart that can do a job of this size. There's a few other golf cart companies and whatnot, but a job of this size is considerable size. And there's 3 of them that I'm well aware of: Cunningham, Deaver, who submitted the bid, and then Triple Crown out of Nicholasville. And each 3 of those, we know for a fact, received the bid. For whatever reason, they just didn't turn them in on time. So to be fair to the company that did turn it in on time, we weren't able to accept the bid late in the finance department. So
Solicitor Ross, even though they didn't turn them in, can we look at the numbers, not considering them as an option, but can we look at the numbers to see how they match up with the winning bidder, to be able to see how everything matches up in their proposed bids, even though we aren't considering them? I guess my thing is, I feel like with one bidder and in a single bidder issue, we're going to get into a situation where we don't know if this is a good deal or not, because it's the only one we really have. And, I want to make sure that what we're getting for the money is a good value.
Right. If we received those bids after the deadline, then I doubt they were even opened. And Sean can
Gotcha.
correct me if I'm wrong on that. So I'm not sure that we have that data or can access that data.
Understood.
So,
I'm sorry. They sent one of them sent them directly to Kirk. The bids are supposed to, as clearly stated in the bid, that they are supposed to go directly to Angie in finance. They came directly to Kirk. They sent it directly to Kirk a day late. So that's the reason why we weren't able. Because they sent it directly to Kirk, so we were able to see the bid. So we have that, but they didn't follow the procedures to send it to Angie, and they were also a day late on it as well.
That's incredibly frustrating. We're trying to get some work out there for people to do, and it doesn't seem like people want to do it.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, that's all the questions that I had. Thank you.
Commissioner Waters, did you have another question?
Oh, I wanted to motion to approve.
Motion accepted. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. And all those in favor say aye.
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 Mayor, I'd like to add, I just wanted to add, I know that Sean had mentioned, we may need golf carts, and I'm hoping that within that, so we do not have a hefty price coming out of one budget, we can start working with finance on maybe go ahead and start replacing those coming with the new budget for the new fiscal year, for us to go ahead and maybe add in a couple of golf courts this year and maybe next year, so it's not one huge expense on one budget. If we can start looking at that, or maybe even looking at the account connected to the on top of the mobile tower on top of Fort Hill, if there's money in that account. I don't know if we can possibly get a golf cart out of that, or two, for that area, but just look at ways that we can start purchasing them and replacing them, so we don't have to say, hey, we're buying 60 golf carts in one go. So if you could start looking at that would be great. That's all, Mayor.
Okay. All right. So that motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Pickens. And we will now move on to the next item, the local participation agreement resolution, repealing resolution number 8, 2021 series. This has to do with the participation rate for the tax increment financing district. I'll let staff start on this.
So Mayor, looking at I'm sorry, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Mr. Russell, yes.
Sorry. When we went back and were reviewing some of the numbers on participation agreement, at the 50% range, not knowing what the county was going to do and not knowing what the state of Kentucky would do also, those numbers were going to run us, they could run us short, let me say that. Talking and looking at the numbers, I think Mr. Cockley ran another set of numbers, did you not, Eric? To see where we would get. So the ultimate goal for us is to make sure that we are able to live up to our development agreement and to pay our debt service from the bond for this transit center. Ms. Boyd, I think, has the information on bond payment and can educate everyone on that. And then we can go from there and see why we think we need to increase the city's participation in this to 75%.
So back in, I think it was maybe January or so, we had our financial advisors run the numbers for that. And if we were to bond the remaining amount for the garage, that's in addition to the grant we're expecting to get, those bond payments were going to be at least a couple $100,000 at a little over 2.1%. Now, obviously, we're 3-4 more months in, so I'm not entirely sure. Mayor, you may be able to answer this question, how the interest rates may have changed. It seems like they may be inching back up just a bit. So there's no guarantee that, obviously, we would still get the 2.1 and some odd change percent. So we've got to consider that as well. It may go up just a little. I'm hoping that, we can get to this sooner rather than later. And then another thing, just to kind of keep this in mind as well, the money that we collect would be dependent upon when we enact the TIF district or activate that, I should say. And so there may be a couple of bond payments that we may need to make before we get our TIF money. So the other thing to consider too is that we want to be able to pay ourselves back. So there would be no reason why we couldn't pay ourselves back for any bond payments we would have already made too. So we want to make sure we put enough money into the TIF district in order to do that as well. That's just a thought of that I had additionally. And I know Eric and Tommy have a lot of knowledge about this as well. So that was my concern on going with the 75%. I just want to make sure that we have plenty of money in the TIF district to take care of what we need to take care of, plus the other folks that are involved in the development agreement as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson, question.
Solicitor Ross, is that accurate? Can we retroactively earmark, for lack of a better term, money that has come in post fact to pay it towards the bond payments that we have paid prior to that going into effect?
Retroactively earmark, Commissioner? I'm sorry, I may not be understanding your question.
Well,
exactly.
the way that it was just explained by Alicia, we may have a couple payments towards the bond that would be able to be paid, and then after we have activated any of those monies that come through, then those could go back to pay for what we were out of pocket, I guess is what she was saying, for those initial payments. Can we do it that way? Is it?
Yes, I do believe we can legally. I'm not sure of the financial process for how we get that done, but I do think that it is legal to do that.
Okay, so that was my easy question. The next question that I really have, I guess, for you, Mayor, is are we really trying to? It sounds like what we're trying to do is take the 50% reimbursement rate that we had originally talked about. And we want to take that off the table and now make it 75% with the idea, and I like what Alicia said, that everybody would be satisfied. I mean, the only other person that isn't at the table that we're not talking about right now is the developer. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand is the reasoning that we want to go to a 75% reimbursement so that we can in some way get the money to the developer so that they are in some way receiving the benefits of the TIF and somehow helping fund the project that way. Is that the real goal here? And if it is, I feel like we kind of crossed that bridge 4 weeks ago when we had the motion and it didn't even get a second. And I feel like we're kind of past that. So I'm just trying to figure out why we're here, and is it in an effort to satisfy the developer at this point? And if so, I just want that to be very clear to the commissioners on what we're voting on. Thank you.
And that is my understanding, is that we do need, well, we're going to get paid back first on any, whether we do the TIF or not, any new property taxes that come from that development. Of course, anything that is a city property tax, we're going to keep in our general fund. And if we pledge 50% or 75% or whatever that number is, we're going to get paid back first. My understanding is that, when the developer, when they were running their numbers, they had been running the assumption that 75% was going to be the number. When I do my math on it based on the most recent projections that were done by the economic firm Commonwealth Economics, I think that if we move it from 50 to 75%, the finished state of that development would have to be somewhere around 85%, based on the numbers that we have been talking about in terms of assumed property taxes from the state, county, and occupational taxes that would be generated. Basically, if we move from 50% to 75%, a developer would have to build that out to about 85% of what we projected. So I think up to that point, it's all our money to pay back our own bonds. And anything above that is when we paid ourselves back first, and then the developer would be able to be reimbursed. So the way I'm viewing it is it's an incentive to, by increasing the property tax rate, it's an incentive for the developer to do that, last bit, whenever that is. So that makes sense. Commissioner Thompson.
It does make sense, but two things that I want to make clear. In January, when we first had this issue brought to us, it was one of the first issues that we discussed. I was very clear that the numbers that Commonwealth Economics, according to all the research that I had done and all of the folks that I trust as experts in this field, those numbers from Commonwealth Economics were incredibly high, and what I called at the time, and I still stand by it, pie in the sky numbers. I don't think that the numbers that are being presented, and in fact, Commonwealth Economics came back sometime later and said, if we're just doing the real property TIF, and they gave us a number that was significantly lower than those first numbers that they had talked about with regard to the development. So again, I caution the commission with the idea that the numbers that have been presented, even to the previous commission and to this commission, are I believe, way out of line of what reality is going to be. That being said, I don't want to get into a situation where, once again, we are subsidizing the work of the developer at this point. we took on an obligation that legally and morally and for every other reason, we had no reason to take on the obligation to build that parking structure. I will always take the position that had a number of developers known that that parking structure was going to be built by the city, that we would have had a whole lot more people bidding on that project, and it would not have sold for $1,000. All that being said, we took on the project, and we have said we're going to do it, and that's fine. But we're doing all this, and then in turn, we are giving a government subsidy to a developer to complete the work that in no way produces economic development on the areas of B and C. It doesn't guarantee any economic development in that area. So all it does is it gets them repaid for work that they're doing. And in turn, as opposed to them using economic development tools to bring in contracts, bring in people to fill these areas, bring in financially beneficial projects for B and C. And that's where I think my issue with all of this, even from the very beginning, has been we're more worried about the subsidization of the program for the developer and doing everything that the developer wants us to do, including building an $8.5 million parking garage, that we're missing sight of the fact that what parcels B and C needs beyond anything else is an economic development plan. And I cannot agree on changing this after we had discussed it. We had a motion that failed. We then made another motion, and it passed based upon all the information that we had at the time. And I felt like it was a well researched and understood. And I think if we're doing it right now, we are essentially telling the citizens that we are doing the bidding of the developer in this deal. And while we're doing that, we're going to give them a payment to reimburse their products in the form and their development in the form of a subsidy. And I just don't like that at all. It frustrated me at the beginning. It frustrates me here. I think the project could go on without any TIF if they truly believed in their economic development initiatives that they have, and it wouldn't even be necessary. So to now ask us to go back and change it so that they're not out any money, I don't like that at all. I will also say that I truly believe that there needs to be a bonding agreement with the developer, that if they do not meet certain standards of the development, that that bond has to be covered. That's how much I genuinely want to keep the developers' feet to the fire. And I can be the bad guy, and I know that they're upset with me from the very first meeting we had, but I don't like this at all. I especially don't like it since we already had a decision on this, and now we're going back to change it just to benefit the developer. And I don't like that. And that I appreciate the time, Mayor.
Mr. Russell.
Thank you, sir. Let me remind everybody that these numbers are projection numbers. So if this thing underachieves, then the 75% we're asking for will help get us closer to our debt service to repay this bond. We are not reimbursing the development for parcels B and C. We're reimbursing the developer for Washington Street, a build of Washington Street, which is a street that we would have. And to remind everybody that we are getting a brand new transit center, which was deemed necessary not by this Board of Commissioners, but by the previous Board of Commissioners, and that's how this came about. Commissioner Thompson, I agree that nobody here knows, everybody understands that this parking structure does not generate enough revenue to pay for itself. Hence the TIF was developed, and they've done these for these projects all along. So the 75% number is to make sure that we can satisfy our debt service, which Ms. Boyd has looked into to make that payment. And if we're going to generate some revenues, we might as well have enough revenue to pay ourselves back.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Cockley.
I was just going to add to Tommy's comments as well, to remind everyone the way the reimbursement works on Washington Street as well. You know, based upon the priorities set in the development agreement, the developer is going to be obliged to invest their own finances in construction of Washington Street, in demolition of the existing parking garage and YMCA facility potentially, and those costs first, giving them a vested interest to complete the rest of the project, because if they don't complete the project to raise property tax revenue and occupational tax revenue, we don't reimburse them for Washington Street. So the way we've arranged this thing puts the developer in a position that once they start the project, they have as much motivation as any other actor in this process to continue and complete the project, because if they do not, then the property never generates a margin, and they are never reimbursed for their investment in Washington Street. So I just want to be clear, they don't get that subsidy from the get-go in hopes that they will continue to do the rest of the project. They don't get that payment back until a margin, the marginal revenue exists to both pay our bond payment off and then have money in excess of that available for them. So I just want to make sure we still make sure that's clear to everybody.
Thank you.
And to piggyback on what Eric has said, we will not reimburse the developer for anything on Washington Street until he provides us with invoices. We will only reimburse once we get documents that say this is how much he's already spent. So it'll be on a reimbursement basis as well. So just to piggyback on what Eric said. Thank you.
Commissioner Unger.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna sort of echo a little bit of what Mr. Cockley said as well. You know, I think it's in the best interest of the developer to develop this property, or else they don't get paid. So, you know, I do plan to support staff on adjusting the percentage from 50 to 75%, but I would like for it to be on the record that, you know, if I'd been on the commission multiple years ago, maybe we wouldn't be here right now. Am I happy with us having a parking garage and potentially owning a parking garage? No. The second it's built, it will degrade and we'll have to put money into it. But we are getting a transit grant out of this, or sorry, we get the transit grant. We are getting a transit center out of this. And there's many things that we will benefit from. You know, the people that ride our transit, they will have public restrooms. They'll have places to sit and wait. You know, there's options for ways we can use that space. Also, you know, I just think that, yeah, I'll just stop on the head. That's all I got.
Any other discussion? I have a couple of points. So Commissioner Waters, yeah.
And I just wanted to clarify with Commissioner Unger that this is not something that the last commission or maybe even the commission before could have derailed this. This is something that has come from the state, and we're just sort of making the best of the lemonade and trying to make it as sweet as possible for us as a city. So regardless if you or anyone else is on the commission, we would still be in this, whether or not we could have taken care of it sooner. If we had two leaders, I guess, moving in the right direction, it would have been more of a city property instead of going back to the city and had it bid. So I could probably agree in that. And I mentioned something in that meeting, but you know, we are here. We have to make the best of it, and hopefully, the best that we can move on. The numbers may not be what we want, but we have to outweigh in what these numbers are. If we continue to talk about this month in and month out, we're continuing to lose leverage, and we don't want this person to walk away. And I understand Commissioner Thompson's view as well, but we have to move forward in this. If not, our outcome is that we lose the transit grant. We lose that. We lose the developer who could hold on to this property until next April, then cause it issues, then go back to the state, working on another couple of years on this project and seeing who gets the property and who doesn't. And then guess what? The vote for a new governor comes in eventually in the next few years, and then we can start all back over if he doesn't get reelected in. And then it's just a returning cycle, just like you and I. We're commissioners. We come in every 2 years. And as soon as another one comes in, or if we don't stay, it just continues. So we have to take a major step. We have to step out. I understand the numbers may not look great. We have to take a step right now saying, hey, we're going to take this step. We are not 110% for sure, but we have got to do something for Frankfort, because if we set and we don't, it's really going to hurt us on an economic standpoint. We have to move forward. I'm not getting anything out of this, but I sure hope that in this decision that we can move forward with staff pushing forward with this developer. We can break some ground, hopefully by the end of the year, and get something moving, because as long as it's a green light, it's not doing anything for anyone. So I understand numbers may not be perfect, because I don't agree on all numbers, but I'm willing to take a chance to say, hey, let's move forward and see what we can do. But definitely want the city reimbursed on anything and everything we put forward. We didn't ask to be put in this situation, but we know that it is in our city limits, and everything that we can do within the city limits to help this economy, we need to do. And the more we continue to talk about it and drag it forward and look at all the ands, ifs, and buts on this black and white piece of paper, we're losing taxpayers' money that we can be. I need a building. I need a building. I need a new YMCA. I need him to start building multi-use. I need him to start building these apartments or whatever, so I can have more people come into Frankfort and live and get this the economic moving in the right direction, I guess you can say. But us continuing to knit and pick, I understand, because I could probably knit and pick just like Mr. Commissioner Thompson. Because I do agree on some points. I don't agree with them, but I'm willing to take a chance and step out on faith and hope that the best interest of the city is going to be upheld. And if not, shame on them for putting us in a bad predicament. But I'm going to have to go ahead and just move forward with this, because Frankfort needs this to survive, and we need it to happen now. Thank you.
Thank you. I entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution repealing resolution number 8, 2021 series and pledging an amount of 75% of incremental revenues generated within the downtown Frankfort development area for a 20-year period to pay for certain public infrastructure costs.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and we have a second. May I ask Commissioner Ross, do we need to amend the previous motion, or what do we, to increase the percentage?
So I believe what Commissioner May just did was make a motion to repeal the one that you all had enacted previously, and at the same time enact a motion pledging the 75%.
Okay. We're doing this all in one motion, right?
Yes, the resolution in front of you does both.
Okay.
It repeals one and gives the option for a new percentage.
Thank you. All right. We have a motion, we have a second, and now discussion. Commissioner Thompson.
Yes, I would like to propose an amendment to that motion, that the developer should be required to bond the development's phases to ensure that the transit center spurs the intended development. And we must be bonded for our initial investment that we put forward. That would protect our interests.
I like that.
Is that a second? Right. So now we have a motion to amend the previous motion, and we have a second on that motion, correct? From Commissioner Waters. Okay. So now first, any discussion on the amendment to the motion?
I just wanted to add a clarity on the reimbursement of Washington Street really quick. I don't know if this is going to lead back to that, but the reimbursement of Washington Street you know, just to clarify, when we're saying reimbursement, isn't he reimbursing himself because he's going to be doing the construction himself? And so when he gives us invoices, it's going to be him creating his own invoices for us to reimburse.
Mr. Cox.
Or is someone else bid out that Washington Street?
The way the development agreement sets forth, he would build Washington Street with whatever subcontractors he may use and his project team that would also likely be the same folks that he would use for the private project elements, which obviously he would be not bonding per se because he's not a public entity, but he'll be financing that himself, the remainder of the private elements. We have no potential liability as far as the private elements go. Those are his responsibilities. Our only responsibility is to accept the FTA grant for the transit center and parking garage. And then in the event that enough revenues exist after that, is to reimburse him after he constructs Washington and then demonstrates for us, you know, proof of those costs. But yeah, you're correct.
Okay, thank you. My second still stands. So there's a motion.
So we have discussion on the amendment to require, let me make sure I'm phrasing this, we're requiring the developer to put up a bond for an equivalent amount of what the city's doing. Is that correct?
To bond the development's phases and to ensure that the transit center spurs the intended development. Essentially, we're talking about him ensuring we get reimbursed for the issuing of the garage bond, so that if the development never happens and we have this amazing parking structure on B and C, that we are then protecting ourselves on that issue. But if nothing else, if there is no other development beyond the parking structure.
And Mr. Russell. You're on mute.
You're on mute, Tommy.
Is it okay for me to speak, Ms. Ross?
Yeah, sure. We're in discussion.
I just want to make sure that that we understand the commissioner's request. Is this going to go back to the development agreement, or is this better suited for this participation agreement? Because I certainly don't want to revisit this development agreement if we don't have to. So that's my question, Ms. Ross, is to make sure we understand this motion.
Well, I will say this, that my intent is more for this to be and we hate using this word these days, but a quid pro quo. I mean, it's a this for that. We're willing to increase the participation up to 75%, but we also want to make sure that we're protected with regard to the development itself. So I think it can be as part of the participation agreement is the way I would envision it. But Solicitor Ross is the boss on this, so she may have a better idea, and I may be causing more problems than.
If I have a couple of thoughts on this, Commissioner, but I would ask, I'm sorry, could you restate that one more time for me, just so that I understand what the motion that you just made with the bonding?
The developer should be required to bond the development's phases to ensure that the transit center spurs the intended development. We must be protected for our initial investment on that part of the project.
Okay, so in the resolution, so you're currently voting on a resolution, I would need to add language regarding that. It would be, I guess what you're saying is perhaps the pledge would be conditional upon the developer submitting to that bonding request. Is that right?
Yes, I think that would be the way I would prefer for it to happen.
Okay, and then what I think that would require, so first of all, the resolution would need to be updated. second of all, the development agreement would most likely need to either be opened back up, or we would need to do a separate supplementary agreement with the developer regarding the bonding. I don't think the local participation agreement is designed to cover items like that. So I do think it would have to be a separate, either through the development agreement or through a separate agreement with the developer.
Can we do an addendum to the participation or to the development agreement?
We could do an addendum to the development agreement. I believe that's fine. When we do that, it will be opening up the agreement even if we're just intending to do.
Sure, I understand. I'm just trying to prevent World War III on, a lot more issues coming in. I was just trying to hone in what the issue was, and if we did an addendum, that would be specific to the issue.
Mr. Cockley.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to respectfully offer as we consider the motion to require the developer, if I understand it appropriately, to not only secure financing for the private elements, but to potentially secure financing to reimburse us for the garage in the event that the rest of the project doesn't happen. If we consider going back and altering the development agreement to include that, that's essentially putting the developer in a position, which was the position we were trying to avoid by going through this whole exercise, which is him financing the entire project. Hence, while we're talking about participating with the garage, I'm just, to be perfectly respectfully honest with the group, that frankly feels like a deal killer to the whole thing. If I'm very concerned that if that's where the commission wants to go, that maybe we need to stop and think about what we're doing. I would hate for that to threaten the developer's ability to actually finance the private projects based upon that change. That could have significant implications for their ability to. I'm afraid we might shoot ourselves in the foot, and that's just, I would respectfully offer that and yield the floor.
May I jump in here? And I'll just say that, when we applied for that transit grant last year as a city, it wasn't our commission, but as a city, we applied for it and we promised to build the parking structure. And I mean, it wasn't contingent on the developer doing this or that. It was, we wanted a transit center. It included a parking structure, and whatever the difference was, we were going to pay. So I think that's the real thing that we need to be, I think all else is gravy. If the developer, if that then unlocks the rest of it and the developer builds the rest, and I think that's what we need to be. Now, this participation agreement and the development agreement, that's all for the purposes of TIF and potential reimbursement from the state. I think that, I don't know if that applies in this case. Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
I guess my question is, it seems like, and I respect what Mr. Cockley says. I trust him. He's a valuable member of our staff, and I've known him for years as a personal friend. I take umbrage with the idea that we had to do certain things, like, well, we filed for this grant, so, well, we got to do it. And, from a legal standpoint, I could argue that we didn't have any obligation to do that. In fact, we took on an obligation that we didn't have. I mean, to this very day, we don't have any obligation. So by us doing all this, we are benefiting the developer significantly. And I know that comments have been made that the developer had never had any intent of building that parking structure. That's fine. But that was the agreement. And the agreement was not between the city of Frankfort and the hotel or the state or anybody else. we weren't even a party to those agreements. So the idea that, well, we applied for a grant, so now we're obligated, and this project that is going up incrementally every time we hear about it is somehow something that we just got to do isn't necessarily true. And I guess my concern is that if we are not willing to get the developer to simply guarantee that he's going to begin and work on the development, then we're really putting ourselves behind the eight ball. All I'm asking is for him to bond the idea that he's going to complete the project as presented. That's it. I'm not asking for anything else, and it's only up to the value of the amount we outlay for the parking structure. Because in the end, if all we end up with is a parking structure, and let's be honest, that's a possibility that's out there. It'll be a really nice parking structure, but we could have an albatross of a parking structure out there with no development, and then we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what to do. And all I'm asking is to have some protection under that. And I'm not asking for anything else. I'm not asking, but if we're gonna change a decision we made 2 meetings ago to increase our reimbursement rate by 25%, all I'm asking for in return is a promise that you're not just going to take the government subsidy on that and not complete the development. I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything else. I'm just trying to protect the city.
Understood. And I just to remind everyone, we're in discussion right now about an amendment to the to repeal the original participation agreement from 50% to 75%. Now we're talking about an amendment to require the developer to, I guess, put up a bond, correct? We want to.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's try to keep it in those lines. Yes, Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Mary. I'm thinking through this as we talk about it, and I do want to propose a couple of scenarios here. So if the resolution that you were to pass tonight included the amendment where the 75% pledge was conditional upon the bonding, we need to think about what would happen if the developer wasn't agreeable to do that, because that means we no longer have any percentage commitment that we've agreed to. Now, this is just a resolution committing to pledge a certain amount. The actual pledge will come in the local participation agreement, but I do want to remind you all that what we're trying to do here is get a resolution that shows the pledge amount you all are willing to commit to, so that we can then present that as we move forward with conversations with the county as we're running on the 60-day ticking clock for getting the local participation agreement done. We'll be needing to do some quick conversations with the county and some quick turnaround with the ordinance and the local participation agreement. So I just want to put it out there as you're debating this, that we do need to think about the consequences if the developer doesn't agree upon that condition.
Mr. Cochran, yeah.
I would also just like to remind the commission that as we've worked through this with TIF Council, the developer, Ms. Ross, Ms. Boyd, Mr. Russell, this body negotiated a development agreement with certain stipulations, priorities, and responsibilities to be fair to all parties and to appropriately motivate all parties. That's a fair agreement, as evidenced by the unanimous vote this Board of Commissioners took several weeks ago. We can debate exactly what number of pledge is most appropriate, and at the end of the day, we're doing this based on projections and assumptions that we're trying to make to be fair to the project and the taxpayers. What we need to do simply today, I beg of you, make it a reasonable pledge that will allow you to uphold what you have already voted to support in that development agreement, which is fair to all parties, as evidenced by your unanimous vote. We need to move forward so that we can get to the next step.
And thank you, Mr. Cockley. And we did not pledge anything in the development agreement, but I agree with you. And I will entertain a vote on this. I think we just called for a vote on the amendment to require the developer to put up a bond. And I'll ask the clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Waldridge,
No.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner May,
No.
Commissioner Unger,
No.
Mayor Wilkerson.
No. Okay, so now we're back to the original repeal and replace from 50% to the 75%. Is that right? Am I right, Mr. Ross? Are we good here?
Yes, yes, the original motion was to repeal the previous one and pledge a certain amount.
Mr. Thompson.
But before calling the vote on this, Mr. Cockley, is it your belief that when we entered into the development agreement and went through that process, and then several weeks later pledged 50% of the real property assets that taxes that came in, that we were somehow not meeting our obligations to as a party to that development agreement? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yes, that's what you're hearing from me. The calculations that staff has shared with you all with that worksheet was meant precisely to help you all consider those numbers. And as we've even discussed, some of those projections, depending on how the project goes out and how fast, maybe even, we may not get to those projections. So as you pointed out earlier, it's conceivable that returns aren't as good as we would like to think. So my opinion would be, yes, based upon what I know to be the best case scenario, I would be very concerned that 50% pledge, especially considering we don't exactly know what the state participation would be, and we don't know what the county may be, would put us in jeopardy of having a development agreement that you all have negotiated and agreed to. And then I would be afraid that we would shoot ourselves in the foot with a pledge that was so low that put us in a very challenging position to have the marginal revenues pay for the things we wanted them to. And that's, I would just simply add to that, that's partially a situation for the developer and for us in terms of our bond payment to deal with. It's not, I would argue, also as simple as that. I would hope that the commission would see as we go through this process and to hope that we get to a successful project, which I know you all want. We're all in this thing. We just got to figure out the best way to do it. And this is a complicated animal. So I appreciate all these questions and really, really digging at it. But what I think about as well is trying to, in terms of considering the pledge, we want to make sure that as the public watches this process play out over the next 20 years, when some of us may still be here, some of us may not, when future commissions, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, may or may not run into a scenario where they're considering using TIF or some other vehicle, I would hate for the public's perception of TIF to be that it is a failed mechanism, and have it be a failed mechanism, not because the project wasn't successful, but because we chose to pledge a smaller amount and then weren't able to have a margin from that pledge document to pay everything back, so that the public perception was that the exercise was a failure.
But Mr. Cockley, wouldn't you agree with me that if the project was successful, very successful, that a lower amount could reach those levels? But what we're doing is we're saying we want to make sure that not only we are paid, but that the developer is paid. And what I'm gathering from you is if we go in and we're only promising 50% of the amounts that to be reimbursed at, that we're somehow putting the development agreement in danger of not being workable for the developer.
Well, I wouldn't say that exactly. I just, I'm just concerned that at that pledge, whether we get the marginal revenue that would cover the costs as laid out in the development agreement. That's all. And like I said, we won't know that answer until several years down the road. So I think it's just for the commission to consider.
Thank you for your assistance.
Commissioner Waters.
Mayor, is there still a motion? The first motion still on the floor?
Still on the floor with a second.
Can we call for a vote, please?
Yes. Ask clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Waldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
No.
Commissioner May,
Yes.
Commissioner Unger,
Yes.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. All right, and now we'll move on. Before we go into executive session, tentative agenda for the regular or special voting meeting of May.
Mayor, I'd like to entertain for the next agenda an update from Blair Hecker on events that are coming up that the city will be putting on, as well as an update on our gift card, as that deadline is coming up June 1. So I'd like to know what has been spent so far, and also just resubmit to say, hey, or if we can get an email out to everyone that did receive gift cards, hey, you're down to a few more weeks to spend your money. Let's get out and spend. And so I'd like an update on that. And then I'd also like to add on their proclamation discussion and resolution discussion.
Okay, Commissioner Unger.
That's my three.
Commissioner Unger.
I was wondering if we could potentially get, and this is, I guess, towards Sean Pickens, an update on the Thoroughbred Trail, seeing where maybe we're sitting there, because I know that a lot of people would like to have a little celebration once that's open, and then also where we're sitting with Dolly Graham Park's renovations.
Okay.
I do know that Dolly Graham, that's online. We do have all that online of where we are with that, and they're doing really well at keeping that up to date. So thanks to park staff. So Dolly Graham is out there on our website. Verbal wouldn't help.
Any other discussion on the next agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive.
Wait, Mayor, I do have a suggestion.
Sure.
I have had ongoing discussions with City Manager Russell and Sean Pickens and a number of citizens regarding the access to our athletic fields. I'm not talking soccer fields this time, but talking about softball and baseball fields. And we need to discuss a plan to task city staff to address some issues. And it may even be something that some city citizens may want to come in and discuss their issues that they've had with staff and people who've been delegated certain things from staff. And I think that's something that we need to address. And it mainly focuses around the use of Capitol View Park.
I like that.
And I want to talk about abandoned properties. I know I talked with staff last week about that and / code enforcement.
Yeah, I was going to say code enforcement.
Commissioner May?
Yeah, if we could get some type of update on wayfinding signs and if the timeline on those to be installed and if it's going to be a while, is it possible during our awesome expansions that we're seeing downtown to maybe get some temporary signage up? You know, if you go to Midway, they got an A-frame sign on the corner that points you in the directions of some things. So in the meantime, can we try to get maybe just an update on where we're at on ours, and then kind of discuss maybe potential possibilities there?
Okay. Commissioner Waters.
I know I've spoke with Miss Beard on this, but I would also just like an update and see if we can choose a date to install Wandale Robinson's Welcome to Frankfort, the home of Wandale Robinson football, as he was Mr. Football before COVID, and it's been hard to be able to get together and celebrate. I would like to go ahead and celebrate him and get it up so it can be up for a little while before we then move Brooklyn Miles in. Miss Beard has been up to date with me on it through email. She's found out that we can't put two names on one sign. We can only put one name at one time. So I suggest that we try to work with Wandale Robinson and his UK schedule right now to try to get him back to Frankfort, since he is closer and not in Nebraska at this time, to go ahead and get it up so it can be up at least for a few months up until the fall, before we can hopefully switch out and put Brooklyn Miles, who is Miss Basketball, up. And I know Miss Beard is on that, but I'd like to get that updated, get that out to the community, knowing that we are pushing forward, and we'd like to get those up. And then eventually I'd like to, for this commission, to entertain something to where we can build something and recognize all people that are coming through that represent Frankfort in some way, maybe in our city, maybe at one of the parks or something of that nature, with a monument or something, maybe, of doing great things, so we can continue to memorize what they've done for our community and how great they were. So, but that's all.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Commissioner Thompson.
Just to piggyback on to what Commissioner Waldridge said, you know, we've got we've got an NFL quarterback right now. We've got a third baseman in baseball, and you know, we're kind of we're a little town with a hotbed of a bunch of professional athletes. So I think it would be great to be able to showcase those in some place. It doesn't have to be in this particular area, but to showcase them, and same goes for the coaches that we have. I know Joey Thacker just broke some record or something. I think we need to encourage these groups with that recognition.
Next agenda, right, Ms. Ross? Okay. We're getting next agenda. We'll talk about that next agenda. Okay, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Mayor, I move that we go into executive session per KRS 61.8101F, personnel discussions which may lead to the appointment of a new city manager. Action may be taken in open session.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 We'll now go into executive session. Okay, we are now back in open session. I will entertain any motions.
Mayor, at this time, you know, it's unfortunate that we are at an impasse with several, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you said something else, Mayor. I apologize. I apologize. You know, it's unfortunate at this time that we're at an impasse of several contractual terms. And right now I'm going to make a motion that we withdraw the current offer to the current candidate for the city manager of Frankfort and discontinue any negotiations.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Waldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner May,
Yes.
Commissioner Unger,
Yes.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Yes, and that motion carries unanimously.
Mayor, if I could make a motion at this time, please.
Commissioner Thompson.
I would make a motion that city staff assist us in reopening the job search for potential city manager candidates to continue until filled.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Sorry, I'm writing the motion down. Commissioner Waldridge,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner May,
Yes.
Commissioner Unger,
Yes.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Yes, and that motion carries unanimously.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Sorry.
Motion. Commissioner Waters, you second that?
I seconded.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are now adjourned. We'll see you next time. Thank
Bye,
you all.
guys. Have a good night.
Bye.